to welcome in the great Tom Silverstein of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Tom, I've been reading you forever. Thank you so much for joining us today. It means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to Cowboys fans to get some intel before this huge game Sunday night.
Sure. Over the years, I've covered the team so long that I used to come to Dallas almost every year because the Packers would play there. It was like, I can't remember how many straight times it was in the 90s where they kept
Playoffs.
having to go to Dallas, both regular season and playoffs. And I always felt like I was part of the Dallas media because I was there so often. So I'm very comfortable talking to your listenership.
Well, look, you brought it up, so I got to go there. That was such a special time, late 90s, or early 90s into the late 90s. Cowboys, Packers, Brett Favre, John Madden, Pat Summerall, right? Mike Holmgren, the whole deal, whether it was Jimmy Johnson or Barry Switzer. What are your memories from those, clashes of two NFL Titans, right? As Green Bay was really emerging and Dallas may have been somewhat tailing off. Your experience covering those matchups.
Yeah, so it really started in 93. The Packers won this miracle game in Detroit on the last second on a Favre's pass to Sterling.
The wild card game, right?
Yes. And then they played the Cowboys and got their butts kicked. And then 94, I believe the same thing happened. And then 95, they upset San Francisco, and then they played Dallas in the NFC Championship game. And I've always wanted to write a book just about that game because there was so much interesting stuff that happened in that game. It was really a phenomenal game, and it was the start of the Packers taking their first big step. They didn't win, but they kind of went toe-to-toe with the Cowboys, and then the following year they won the Super Bowl. But there were so many interesting things in that game. Dion played wide receiver in that game. One of the Packers coaches suffered a fractured skull in that game. He got hurt. He got hit on the sidelines by a player in the game. Was Gil Haskell was his name.
Wow.
And the game was like interrupted for like 20 minutes. And it was like Mike Holmgren's best friend in the whole world. And, I think he was, it was very serious. I may be blending ones together, but I think there was John Yurkovich was all mad that Eric Williams had cut him at the knees. I mean, there's just so much stuff that went on, and I believe I may be blending these games together, but it was really a fascinating time, and Dallas was just a powerhouse. You knew you had to get through Dallas, and the Packers couldn't, and it didn't happen until '96, and then Dallas lost in the playoffs, so they never got the chance to beat them. Again, they finally faced them in '97 and Green Bay and beat them. But yeah,
well,
it was an interesting
you mentioned
time.
it. That was. I don't know that we get to see it as much now as we did then. Sort of the unseating, right, of the great teams. Like we saw it in basketball with the Bulls and Detroit, and we saw it in the NFL. Like you're talking about, the Packers didn't exact specific retribution against the Cowboys, but it was clear. They battled them, and then finally they were able to reach the mountaintop. That was a special time. And you said you can blend them all together. That's a delightful smoothie to taste, right? You throw all those in a blender, I got no problem. I want to bring it to present day. Obviously, it was way different. I'm a Philly guy, right? Grew up in Philadelphia, heartbroken when Reggie left and was a free agent, went to Green Bay. But also, he had become such a part of the fabric of Philadelphia and such a good man. Like you sort of rooted for him, so you wanted to see him win that Super Bowl. Much different situation as far as the transaction is concerned, but Micah Parsons now with the Cowboys, you got a chance to see Reggie come to Green Bay and help them get over that hump to win a Super Bowl. And you're seeing Micah now in Green Bay. Same not exact type player, but a pass rusher was important then, very important now, and can change the way a team has to prepare for you and the way your defense plays. Any similarities there, or anything you draw, like sort of the similarities where you see that shaping up to be, certainly like matched right up against one another?
It's a great question. I wrote an entire column on it when the trade happened, or a few days after, and there's some really significant parts of it that make it different. And the biggest one is that when Reggie came, the Packers were not that good. They had come off 20 years of pretty much ineptitude. And they had finally kind of broken through a little bit in 92. They didn't make the playoffs, but they had a winning season, and they had Mike Holmgren, and they had Ron Wolf, and you could kind of tell that they had something that might be going there. But Reggie was brought in to be the foundation. So once he got there, he was not surrounded by a lot of great players. They were starting to get, Leroy Butler was on that team, um, but they didn't have Sean Jones. They didn't have Santana Dotson. Gilbert Brown was just like an undrafted free agent. A lot of those guys came later. So he built the foundation. He sort of made it okay to come to Green Bay,
Yeah.
because Green Bay was really, it was a terrible place for a minority athlete, African American athlete to come to. I mean, it was totally white town, very kind of backwards. And Reggie, he made his residence there, and they built up the facilities, and he made it okay to come there. And that changed everything after that. Of course, with Favre too. Favre made a huge difference as well. Reggie wasn't the only guy, but the difference with Micah is that they're pretty established. He's the final piece of the puzzle. He's not the foundation. He's like, okay, we baked the cake. Now he's going to be that frosting, and he's the one who's going to push them over the top. So that was the biggest difference in my mind between those two acquisitions.
Now, heading into this game, I always, you're old school, and I'm sure you know the name Jimmy Breslin, right? The old school newspaper guy out of New York City. And Breslin, I loved his quote. Like, he was the guy who wrote the story on the man who dug JFK's grave,
Yep,
right? And
that's what I remember him as. Yeah.
Yes, and his theory was like, the big story is almost, maybe it's in the loser's locker room, right? Like it's some place where not everybody is headed. Micah Parsons coming back to Dallas. Has there been a thread that you have identified that is sort of unique in a sense that no one else has really hit on it yet? Or maybe it's a feeling you have, or a vibe from having covered this team in this game for so long, that is different about this young man coming back to Dallas after a messy breakup?
Yeah. What I really think it is, there's a couple of things that go through my mind. Number one is that they have not even scraped the surface of figuring out what he does best and how to use him. And so, in fact, I was asking the defensive coordinator about that on Thursday, and he was telling me, like, well, there's a play, there's a rush they have, sort of a stunt kind of thing, where they set it up for Parsons, and he was so quick to the ball that it ruined the whole thing. And they were like, oh, we can't run that anymore because he's too fast off the ball. So they're learning what Micah Parsons can do for them within their system. And I think when he comes to Dallas, it's going to be more of him doing one-on-one stuff, of him trying to break through double teams. If they were to play Dallas in week 16, I think he'd be a completely different player. He'd be used completely differently than he will be there. As for coming to Dallas, his biggest impact, besides the fact it takes two guys to block him, is that he's really brought kind of a aggressive attitude to the defense. They were trying to build that, bring it up, but they sort of given everybody a chance to go, well, there's going to be pressure on the quarterback almost every down. And so now I can play a different way. And I think you see them playing a different way than they were last year, where they were kind of sat back in zones and just tried to keep the deep ball away from people.
So it's not just the attitude, right? It's the overall mentality, which is pretty specific and pretty important for a defensive unit.
Yeah, and I don't know how long it will last. Maybe it will last forever, but he's playing with his hair on fire. And the first three games, I had watched him. I watched almost every game last year with the Cowboys, and I noticed a lot of times where he was standing around after a play was run to the opposite side, where maybe it was because that's how Zimmer's defense was, or whatever. But right now he's just going after everything, and I don't know if he'll look different to Cowboys fans when they see him, but he's playing a jillion miles an hour every play. And usually your superstars don't play that way. They just don't. There aren't that many guys who play that way. And I don't know how long that will last, but it's really having an impact on the Packers defense right now.
Question for you. Did you go back and watch all the games after he was traded for? Or had you already watched?
No, after he's traded, I wanted to see how Zimmer was using him, because I knew that Dan Quinn had used him differently, had moved him around and put him at linebacker. So I wanted to see what he was like last year. Now, I know some of these games he probably was still nursing that ankle, and maybe that was part of the reason why he wasn't going 100 miles an hour always. But I was very curious to see how they used him. And I asked him in his press conference, do you want to be used more like you were in Quinn's system or in Zimmer's system? And he went on for 10 minutes about how he wants to be moved around and not kept in one place.
It's cool, dude. I asked you that question because I think that just speaks to why you're so successful and why you've been such a joy to read over these years. So a couple more questions for you. I know you got stuff to do today as you're on the cusp of covering a big game. Kenny Clark, an opportunity to play against his old team. And I think that gets somewhat overshadowed or lost in the sauce. He was a guy, if you talk to people around the Packers organization, you guys watched him grow up, whether you're a member of the media or in the front office over there, player, coach, whatever. What do you think his impact will be on Sunday night?
Well, I told one of the Cowboys PR people when I was requesting an interview for him that by far, since he's been with the team, he's been my favorite player to deal with.
Really?
Because he's such a good human being. Now, usually I don't make that assessment on players because you never know what's going on behind the scenes. You think a guy, you're only seeing him in the locker room.
Yeah.
But Kenny Clark, everything you heard from everybody, his background, he came to the Packers when he's 20 years old, and he's just a delight to deal with, and the players just respect the hell out of him. I've been a big defender of his in the last couple of years. People have been a little critical, like he hasn't made enough big plays or he hasn't gotten after the quarterback or sacked the quarterback. But I think that's all a bunch of bull because he gets pressures. He doesn't always get to the quarterback, but he pressures up the middle. And almost every team that faces him, one of the first things they decide is how they're going to block him. And the other thing is that he kind of was played out of position the last 2 years because they had this 330-pound guy that wanted to get on the field, TJ Slayton. And so they moved Clark to sort of three technique and somewhat of an end, and sometimes he played the nose. But when you line him up over the nose, there's hardly a center that can block him one-on-one. and he disrupts in the run and pass game. And he's 30 years old. He's not the player he was 3 years ago, but I still think there's a lot left in his tank. And if you are building a run defense, you want to build it around him. That's for sure.
I would urge people to read your story, right? I think it was 2 days ago in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel about Ellington and how he's a center now and he's going to have to go toe-to-toe with his old teammate. Pretty cool there. One more Micah thing before I ask you about Jordan Love, and then we'll get you out of here. How has Micah been with the media?
Good. No, I'll never forget. So I don't know if you remember that game up in Green Bay when they beat McCarthy and Christian Watson just went off.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like his first big game for the Packers. And I'll never forget, I decided I'm going to go into the Cowboys locker room and see if anybody even knew who Christian Watson was.
That's the Jimmy Breslin, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember asking Parsons about it, and he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, I have him on my Madden team, he's like, kills it for me, and I was like, that was a good answer. That's pretty funny. I could tell there was something a little different about him that, he's not going to give you the typical, play 110% and give it your all. So I think he's been pretty interesting. I haven't really had a chance to ask him too many questions, but I think he's been good. And, he's had to spend a lot of time catching up to learn the defense. And so, we don't see him around a lot, but they make him available once a week and after games, and he's been fine.
So Jordan Love last week against the Browns, was that a hiccup or is that who this guy is? Like, is he someone who you believe in your years of covering the NFL has what it takes to lead the Packers to a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl victory?
Well, I thought so. I had to rank the Packers roster 1 through 53, and I was just racking my brain trying to decide whether to go with Love or Parsons. And I finally went with Love because I thought this was going to be the year that he kind of takes it up. He's got the talent, he's got the brains, he's got the mobility. It's there, but it doesn't always show itself, and it didn't show itself against Cleveland. Now, there were protection issues that were at work, he was just getting slammed. The whole game. But in the clutch, 3rd and 3, the last thing you can do with 3 minutes left is throw an interception in your own territory. And he did. And to me, we'll find out whether that's a hiccup. That's like a red flag. But let's see whether that was a hiccup or whether that was something we'll see more often. I think this is a real defining year for him.
Dude, I think this is a defining game. That's a great point you make. What happens to us in life is one thing, how we react to it, right? And how does he handle all this? It's going to be a lot of fun. Tom, man, I know you're a busy guy. You're a legend. I thank you so much, man. It was a real treat to talk to you one-on-one and to pick your brain about some of this stuff. You, of course, can read Tom in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and the podcast. What's the podcast again?
It's called Green 19 Podcast. If you listen to it, you'll hear why it's called Green 19. So.
All right. Tom, man, thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure anytime.
All right. Thanks a lot. There he goes. Tom Silverstein. He has said it all, man. That was what a treasure, dude. That's a lot of fun. You can tell that gets me sort of giddy when you get to talk to someone like that who has, seen all the battles, right? Has battle scars of his own, walking into locker rooms, covering these teams for the better part of 30 plus years. And I am not here to dole out lessons to young journalists, but like the fact that he went back and watched all those Micah games, like it ain't all hot takes and podcasts like, fire, dude. That is a real journalist. And that is why the dude is so good. All right, the Pete Souza Show presented by Slovaceks will step aside. We're talking Major League Baseball when we come back. We don't do that too often. I call football and basketball games I call college baseball for the Big 12, but I'm looking forward to talking to Nick Pick about Major League Baseball. The Pete Souza Show on the Rogue Media Network, presented by Savachix. Back after this.